Last week, we started a series on stewardship. I don't think I mentioned what I'm calling this series, but it's Keeping It Real. Keeping It Real, because it's probably the most practical series you will ever hear. I mean, I try to make all my messages practical, but this is real practical, all right? So, Keeping It Real. And I don't want to, maybe you've heard the saying, don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. And sometimes we over-spiritualize things, and we kind of have this dualistic mindset where there's certain things that are spiritual and other things that aren't spiritual. And so when we're praying and reading our Bible and going to church and getting involved in things, that's spiritual. But stewarding other areas of my life, that's really not that spiritual. But whenever you understand that Christ is the head and we are the body, and a head can't function without a body, and a body can't survive without a head, you'll start to realize that everything can be spiritual if you allow it to. Everything can be an appointment with God if you involve Him. And now, I mean, He's there all the time, but when you acknowledge His presence, we don't have to ask God to show up. We don't have to say, Holy Spirit, you're welcome here. He's here. So let's acknowledge that presence. Quit trying to act like we have to do certain things or usher in the presence of the Holy Spirit and say, man, He's with me all the time. And I start acknowledging it, and things will start to change. So stewarding every area of our life can be and should be a spiritual experience. Because of God's grace, you have been equipped with everything you need for an abundant life. But if you don't steward it, you're probably not going to experience the fullness of it. If you haven't had this mindset leading up to this point and your life is pretty good, or at least in certain areas it's pretty good, I think about it that way because I've gone this far without involving God. How much more can I experience if I let Him move in my life and acknowledge that presence? I mean, some of you do it, but those of you who aren't, now, if I'm completely honest, there's areas of my life where I don't consistently involve God. So I'm right where I am in those certain areas because of that lack of involvement. We're meant to steward what we've been given. The verse we're using in this series is 1 Peter 4, verse 10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received. I should underline that because this is all past tense. Everything in the new covenant is past tense. Everything's already been given to you. Every gift, every promise, everything you need for life and godliness is already yours. It's already within you. You have received it. It's within you. Thank God is right because you don't have to try to earn it. It's yours. Now you acknowledge it. And that's how, when you get to start experiencing it and using it, but it says each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Grace in various forms. That means every area of your life. Again, we can spiritualize certain areas of our life, but there's various forms of grace. That means you have grace in your relationship with God and those things that we see as spiritual, but you also have grace for relationships. You have grace for managing your time. You have grace for just every single aspect of life. And when you understand that and the power that you possess and the gift you have received to serve others, and you start to steward those things faithfully, that's when life gets good, real good. And so this life, your whole life is a gift from God. I mentioned it last week. We talked about it more on Wednesday, that this life is a gift of God, gift from God. So we're not even the owners of this life. And I know that makes some of us uncomfortable, and it kind of bothers some of us because we've been taught that take ownership. You know, grab yourself by the bootstraps and get things done and own this thing. But the reality is we're not the owners of this life. We're stewards of this life. We got to keep looking back. Where did this life come from? Why am I here? Why? Like a child, right? But Genesis 2:7 says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." This life was given to you. Now, everything that you have experienced up to this point is a product of how you've stewarded what was given to you. Am I making sense? So yeah, you've created the world that you have, or, that's kind of the harsh way of saying it, I guess. But I mean, sometimes things happen to us that are our own fault. Some things are out of our control because other people make poor decisions or whatever. But our response to it is 100% up to us. All right. And it's so even how have you responded to the storms? How have you responded to the bad things and the good things? And that how you've responded to those things has gotten to you right here this morning. And that should excite you. Because if you don't like where you are right here this morning, obviously not physically, because this is awesome. Who wouldn't want to be here? But in your life, where you're at, if you don't like it, it's because of the decisions you've made or the poor stewardship in certain areas leading up to this point. Now you have the power to change it. God has given you that power. You're not the owner, but you're the steward. Everyone likes to think that God's in control and pulling the strings, the puppet strings behind the scenes, but that's not how it works. That's not at all how it works. God doesn't control every aspect of your life. He has given you control. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And you will start to experience things as you steward it correctly. I've used this example many times, but it's like a landlord over a property. They are the owner of that house. But then they hand over the keys to the person leasing it. And now the person that has been given the keys to this property has a choice to make. They can treat this house better and leave it better off than whenever they received it, or they can completely trash it. And I've seen houses that were rented by people that I don't even know how they lived in it. It was so disgusting, and they did not treat it well, but it wasn't the landlord's will that the house was treated that way. It was, he gave authority, he gave power, he gave control over whenever he handed the keys over. And that's how God has done it for us. He is the owner of this world. He is in charge of everything, but he's not in control of everything. He's given you control. So the bad things, whenever they happen, we don't have to say, well, everything happens for a reason. God's in control. It's like, yeah, things happen for a reason. And 9 times out of 10, it's because we weren't good stewards with what we have. And that very slim section is things that are kind of out of our control. But even then, we can respond to it differently. Does that make sense? Okay. Because y'all are like looking at me like, I don't know about that. We just say things sometimes, don't we? Or it's like, everything happens for a reason, or God gives the toughest battles to the strongest soldiers, or however it goes, and that's just not how it works. We'll stay on track. You didn't create any of your life. Your life as you know it is the way it is because how the gift has been stewarded. Nothing you have is yours, but it is all for you. Even that paradigm shift right there. Because a lot of times when we think of stewardship, we think we're doing it to serve God. I need to do this to serve God to the best of my ability. But serving in obedience is a fruit. It's not an action. So as you understand things, you start stewarding it the right way, your identity in Christ, the true nature of God, as you start to understand that, a result of that is obedience and service. But Jesus said he didn't come to be served, but to serve. So our motive behind it is not, I need to be a better servant for Christ. The only time the Apostle Paul talks about being a servant, he's a servant of the gospel. He's serving people. He's going out and putting his life on the line to serve others, to expand the kingdom of God. But it's not trying to earn anything from God. It's not trying to make God more pleased with him or be more accepted by God. You are loved. He is pleased. You are accepted. It's a done deal. All of it. It's good news. You're not the owner. You're the steward. All the pieces of the puzzle have been provided. but you have to put it together. This verse, I shared it last week as well, but it's been speaking to me probably the last 3-4 months, but it's Ecclesiastes 1, starting in verse 9. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new. It has already been in ancient times before us. So what that means is when God spoke the world into existence, those 6 days of creation, everything on this planet was there. Nothing new has been created since the dawn of time, since God spoke it into existence. Then people came along and he says, be fruitful, multiply, subdue it, or dominate. Take what I've created and put the pieces together. So this podium was made when God spoke the world into existence. These chairs you're sitting in were there. God just needed the right people to come along and put the pieces together. And that's the exact same way our life is. The life that you were created to live, everything is here. Everything's waiting for you to put the pieces together. And God's given you the power to do that. Mark Twain said, he doesn't say it anymore. Mark Twain said, the 2 most important days of your life are when you're born, the day you're born, and the day you find out why. This church, Grace Life Church, is essentially that. I want to help you, we want to help you discover what you're created for. And too many times we're just working at jobs we hate so we can buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. And then what? Is that what life is? The rat race, where we're just so exhausted because we're just trying to earn a paycheck that we don't have time to do anything that will actually benefit us or benefit the people around us. That's not at all what God wants for us. So we delight ourselves in the Lord. He puts a new desire in our heart, and then we start to put those pieces together. You are made on purpose for a purpose. And when you discover what that purpose is, then you can start to put it all together. But when you don't know your purpose, you'll start to add pieces to this puzzle that are from other puzzles. So just so y'all have a visual, it'll help, right? But so I have a picture in my mind of what I was created for. God's made me on purpose for a purpose, and now this picture right here is becoming more clear. And I start to get it, but I have to open it first. So you open the gift, and you realize, you start to get your bearings a little bit, and then you start putting the pieces together. And it is a process, and it's a journey, and things it just doesn't happen overnight, but you can start putting pieces together little by little. And isn't it exciting? This is a 1,000-piece puzzle. Laura, maybe one of y'all got her a 2,000-piece puzzle. She accidentally told everyone that she loves puzzles, and now she's got like 18 of them at the house she's got to put together. But this 2,000-piece puzzle is super difficult. It's super difficult to put together, so whenever just 2 pieces fit the way they're supposed to, it's kind of exciting. And then it's like I go from hating puzzles to, all right, well, 5 more minutes. And then you find another one. And it's like, oh, you just keep going. And it's an exciting process. And that's what happens whenever you start to put these pieces together. You get a clear vision of your future, and you start acting on it. Where there's no vision, the people perish. So many of us don't even know where we're headed. We're just living life and just kind of wandering aimlessly. But when you get a vision for your future, you open the gift and you start putting the pieces together, it's exciting and addicting. And you can't wait to see what's next. But if you don't have a vision, you're just dealing with a bunch of puzzle pieces. I don't have 2 hands to work with here, but then you have multiple. And I could have a whole bunch of puzzles up here because I don't have a vision for my future, and I just have pieces from all these different puzzles laying out in front of me, and I start to try to make pieces fit that don't really go together or don't even belong to the same puzzle, and everything's a mess, and everything's difficult, and everything's frustrating. So you spend time with God, you delight yourself in the Lord, and you get a desire in your heart, and you get a clearer vision, and things get easier. If you've ever put together, imagine everybody's put a puzzle together at some point in your life. Whenever you try to make a piece fit in a place that it doesn't belong, it might look right, and it kind of fits, and you kind of shove it in there, and it's like, all right, you got to admit to yourself that wasn't right. And then whenever you undo it, a lot of times other pieces kind of get torn up, and you got to break it apart and put everything back in place. That's same with life. Whenever you're trying to fit things in that don't really fit, it kind of messes everything up for a little while. But now you know where the pieces go, and you can easily put them back. So just stop trying to force things that don't belong and just get a clearer vision. And yeah, there's going to be course correction, and there's going to be things that change along the way. As I've told y'all, when we started this church, I thought it was going to look a lot different. The overall vision has remained the same, but the little details have shifted along the way. Even in the last 4 or 5 months, the vision for this church has shifted for me. I don't know why, I used to think I wanted this big old church and 1,000-member church, and we were going to do some stuff. And I justified it in my mind saying, well, yeah, you got to have lots of people to do stuff. But I think I just had this picture in my mind because you need to, that's just what you do. You start a church and you try to grow it as quickly as you can and as large as you possibly can. But I'll tell you, in the last 4 or 5 months, that picture has shrunk a little bit. And I had to really spend some time with the Lord because I thought, am I lowering my expectation because things haven't worked the way that I thought they would? And I just spent time delit myself in the Lord. And I realized, no, I don't think that's for us. And I could go into the why and how you lose a lot of community and that sort of thing as the church grows. But, I don't know what that means. 200-300 members is a good-sized church where we still have a community and we can still accomplish what God's called us to accomplish. And then as the church continues to grow, we can send other people out to start their own churches and ministries or whatever the Lord's called them to do. That's the new vision. There you go. I wasn't planning on sharing that. But so, and I really want it. I never want to, because if faith is an expectation, a lot of times when we don't see what we're expecting to see, rather than keep pushing forward, we lower our expectation. So I really wanted to be clear on that that's not what I was doing. And I just don't think that is. I feel like we are a discipleship center, and we're not going to have that same environment that I think the Lord wants for us if we're just massive. So anyway, that was separate. You're welcome. All right. When we start to add all these other pieces to our life that don't belong, that's when we start to feel overwhelmed. And I see that as a huge problem in our society. People are overwhelmed. We're working long hours, and when we're not working, we're attached to this thing. That one's ringing over there, so that's good. Who is it? No, I'm just joking. I'm sorry. I thought it was Ryan. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't think it was Ryan. But that was good timing, by the way. It helps. But we're attached to these things. So even when we're not at work, we have this leash, and we're constantly filling our minds with information or just nonsense, and we're all stressed out as a society. Antidepressant medications, anti-anxiety medications are just through the roof in our society. And now, I'm not against medication or anything. Y'all know that. But man, what if we got to the root of the problem here? We're not created to live a life of stress. We're created to live a life of rest. And when you're at a place of rest, you actually accomplish more. So we're so overwhelmed and stressed out as a society that we're really not getting anything done, and we're just spinning our wheels. We're not happy with our life. That's not everybody, and it might not be you, but I would imagine that there's pieces of your life where this does apply. We're filling our time with unnecessary things that are taking us in the wrong direction. So last week we talked about stewardship, overall, the importance of stewardship. Now over the next, I don't know how long, we're going to break it down to different areas of our life. And today we're talking about stewarding time. That's the number one reason I hear why people don't act on the vision, why people don't act on the dream. They have a desire come up in their heart, and they really feel like they're starting to discover a new path for their life. But when am I going to have time to do this? I work full time. I have a house full of kids. I got to clean. I got to cook. I got a yard to mow. All this stuff. And I just don't have time. Ephesians 5:15 says in the Amplified, look carefully then how you walk. Live purposefully and worthily and accurately, not as an unwise and witless, not as the unwise and witless, but as wise, sensible, intelligent people, making the very most of the time, buying up each opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be vague and thoughtless and foolish, but understanding and firmly grasping what the will of the Lord is. The world is trying to steal our time, but when we steward our time wisely, it'll push us toward the life we were created for. I mean, there's things that have to get done. So you can't just do whatever you want. Oh man, I wish I could just go, I would get a tiny house out on a lake somewhere or by a river and just chill, and that would be awesome. But you got to pay for it. You got to, there's things that you have to do. But I read statistics that show that most people spend 80% of their time doing the things they have to do and only 20% of the time doing what they want to do. And I think if a goal that we all should have is to flip those numbers and spend 80% of the time doing what we want to do and 20% with the things we have to do. Some of you are like, that's not possible. I think it's the same with our finances. What if we could live off 20% of our finances and give 80% of it away? We are meant to be to live a life of rest. We're meant to be cheerful givers. But we're so overwhelmed that we can't even keep our head above water, let alone try something new or give more or any of that. I felt like that whenever I was listening to this guy, Billy Epperhart. He's from Charis Bible College, and he was saying how it was really about real estate, investing, and that sort of thing. And I won't go into all this detail and stuff, but he was talking about this, how you can really start to prosper and then live the life that you want by making certain investments. And I was listening to it, and it sounded great, but in my mind I was like, I'm so far in debt, I can't even begin. I got to get to level ground before I can even start dreaming about this stuff. This is too overwhelming. I can't even breathe right now, or let alone think about investing in real estate and all this stuff. And the Lord used that time in my life to really transform a lot of things that were messed up on the inside of me. And we involved God, and we paid off all the debt, and now we're working toward other things. But if you're hearing this and thinking that it's impossible, I'm telling you it's not impossible. Without God, it's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Not for God. It's not God just going to go out and make it happen. It's with God. Involve God, and all things are possible. The things that are alive on the inside of you will soon be alive on the outside of you if you involve God in it. So, here's the practical side. I brought the whiteboard out because we're like college around here, right? But the first thing you need to do is identify where you're spending your time. I guarantee you have more time than you realize. I guarantee you. I guarantee you have more time than you realize. How are you stewarding that time? That's the question. So first thing you do is identify where you're spending your time. Write it down. Take 1 week and write everything down. Don't make any changes, just write. I spent this time sleeping, this time working, this time commuting, this time getting ready for work. Watching TV, throw that in there. Looking at this silly thing. I told Laura yesterday, I'm about to just snap this thing in half. I sit down, and I mean, not because I have peace and joy and all that, I wouldn't, but I just sit down on the couch, pick it up, scroll. And last week, me and a couple of the kids were watching a movie and I'm over there. I could care less about this cartoon that we're watching. And I'm over there, scroll, and my son like laughed, and when he was like laughing at that, and he looks at me, expecting me to be laughing, and I didn't even know what was going on. I was staring at my phone, and it's like, I don't care about the movie, but I care about my son, and this is time with him, and here I am looking at this. I'm giving y'all a lot of extra this morning, but I really had to be mindful. That's my crutch or whatever. Anyway, so write it all down. Now, take all the information you collected, get out the old calculator, and start looking at it. Look at it like a budget. I might need one of y'all to help me with a calculator or something, because I'm not good at math, but I'm writing this down, and you're going to think, why is he writing it down? This is simple. You don't need to write it down, because I've learned that whenever we just take the time, even I'm not a big note taker. Whenever I'm in a church service or something, I just listen. I might write a thing or two down, but I used to not write many notes. And I've learned that whenever you put your hand to a pencil, not even typing, but writing it down, things start to click a little bit better. So I'll even write things down that I already think I know, then I'll write it down, and I didn't know it at all. So anyway, that's why I'm doing this. All right, so in a week, we have 168 hours. So sleep. I wrote some of these down so I'd get the math right. Average person, they say, should get between 7 and 8. So you multiply that. 7 and 8 hours, so you multiply that. It's 49, but I'm going to do 50 because, math. I already forgot what that is. 128? 118. This is a bad idea. All right. So there we are, 118. Then I have work, 40 hours full-time. Some of y'all work more, some of you work less, plus a commute. Some of you drive really far, some of you don't. I just took 40 hours a week, 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. So that's close enough, right? So we'll go with, what is that? 45. That's work. What did I say this was? Sleep. What? 73. Workout. An hour a day. 1 hour a day. We'll get to that next week, I think. All right. Workout. There's no time. 66. Workout, shower, get ready. It takes me about 7 minutes, but I put an hour. If it takes you, women, if it takes you more than an hour, that's silliness. But anyway, 7, that's what, 59, right? Shower, cook, again another 7, 52. So we're at cook, clean up. I'm getting somewhere, folks. Stick with me. So 52. Then we got housework, yard. I'm going to go with an hour a day. 45, I got that one. 45, watching TV. I read a statistic. The average person spends 3 hours and 17 minutes a day watching TV. 3 hours and 17 minutes. I mean, if you think about it, you get home, you want to just veg out for a little while, you watch an episode, then that's 2 and 3. It's really not that far-fetched, but I was shocked. But I have 23 hours. That's almost a full day in a week. Where are we at? 22. Social media, cell phones. This one's crazy. 5 hours a day is the average in America on your cell phone. 5 hours a day. Did I mess up? Is it? Well, I'm getting there. What do you want to put there then, Paul? You're probably not a good example. Let's who's on their phone all the time? Let's be honest. I'm going to stick with the statistics because it's in my notes. Just take it or leave it. All right? All right. Now we're not 25, 20. So now we're left with 2 hours. And this is, I mean, of course, the numbers are a little skewed, and some of this is not going to exactly, but if you look at this, 168 hours in a week spent doing all this. Some of this is have to, some of this is want to, or really shouldn't. It's not even want to, it's just I shouldn't. So you just start looking at these things. What if I am made on purpose for a purpose? And I'm really unhappy with where my life is right now, but I just don't have time to start that new business, to spend time. We didn't even put, time with God or growing spiritually or any of that. We didn't even include that because most people don't. We're not that type of church, but if 2 hours, no wonder we feel overwhelmed and like we don't have any time. So we start marking some of this stuff off. Drop that down to a lower number. Drop that down to a lower number. If you're working and commuting, what are you doing on your drive? Are you listening to talk radio and politics? I'm preaching to somebody, and that's not, don't yay that. But don't do that, because we're filling our mind with this fear and this stuff that's not benefiting anybody. Don't keep your head in the sand. Know what's going on in the world. But if that's all we're listening to, I used to drive an hour and 15 minutes to Bible college. Bible college was 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. On my way, on that hour and 15 minutes, I would listen to more teaching, or I would listen to worship music, and I would that was my time with God, because I got up at 2:30 in the morning to go work, all that. So I spent a lot of that time continuing to grow. When I first started, I was listening to a lot of stuff, or not even bad stuff, but not good stuff, just music or whatever. And I started to say, you know what? If I don't have much time throughout my day, when can I fill things in to this schedule? Well, that hour and 15 minutes one way was a good place to start, and I started to do that, and things started to change on the inside of me. But let's be good stewards with our time. You have more time than you would like to admit. You just have to make some tough decisions. And it is a process, because even with me acknowledging this silly thing, I still find myself, just out of habit, picking it up, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? Stop it. Put it down. Put it in the other room. Throw it in the trash. No, I can't do that. I like to look at a lot of studies and the science behind things, and there is a why we do those things and fill our time with unnecessary things. And it's a lot of it has to do with lack of purpose, lack of vision. And I watched this study, and they had this guy. There was 2 actors in a room with a guy that didn't know they were actors, and it was just, there were shelves with nothing on the shelves, and some cabinets, empty cabinets, and then on the table there was this buzzer, big red button on top. And one of the actors was looking at it, they knew what it was, and when you push it, it would shock you. And they did it, and then the other actor touched it, and it shocked them, then told the actual guy there, you want to try it? He's like, I guess, because peer pressure and all that. So he touched it, and it shocked him, and he said, man, it was a pretty intense shock. And they asked him what he thought about it, and he said, I didn't like that at all. My arm's still twinging. It was like 2 minutes later, and he was still feeling that electrical shock. Well, then a little while later, everyone left, except they left this guy in the room by himself, waiting for whatever was supposed to be next, and it was just him and the buzzer. And like I said, he didn't have a phone, he didn't have anything to do, the shelves were empty. So he's sitting there, and the plan was to leave him there for half an hour. So they were watching him, and after 30 seconds, he got up and started looking at the shelves, the empty shells, but just to have something to do. He's bored already, 30 seconds in. He's messing with that, opening the cabinet, nothing in there. And just 2 minutes in, he went over to that buzzer and hit the buzzer. And later they asked him, he was just bored. And it's funny that that's what we do in an attempt, and especially in today's day and age and in our society, we're willing to do things we know are going to cause us harm, that are going to hurt us, because we're just so afraid of being bored. We're so afraid of rest. The one thing that we're created to experience, we don't even do it because we got to always be fidgeting with something and doing something. But if we learn to just rest, that's when things get good. There's a phrase, this is such a common problem in our society, they've put a name to it. Revenge, bedtime, procrastination. Have you heard of this? It's a psychological phenomenon in which people stay up later than they desire in an attempt to have control over the night because they perceive themselves, perhaps subconsciously, to lack influence over events during the day. So we're living these lives, working at jobs we don't like, and filling our time with all this stuff that at night we finally can take back control. And what do we do with it? We look at our phones, we watch movies, and whatever. It could even be reading a book. But then we're sacrificing sleep just because we're trying to regain control of our life. Do you think that's what we're created for? Again, this life is not our own. What are we doing with it? This perspective changes how you start to look at the world. It causes you to look at how you spend your time. God's given me this gift. What am I doing with it? None of this, I should have started with this, none of this changes how God feels about you. You are loved unconditionally by the Father. You are blessed. You are righteous. You are holy. You are blameless. All those things are still true, even if you stare at your phone all day. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Even God still loves you. But are you going to experience the fullness of this life, this gift that has been given to you? After work, we say things like, I'm exhausted, mentally, physically exhausted. I just want to relax. I don't want to use my brain. I've been using it all day. And that should be a red flag right there. If that's your life, you have God's given you control, and you can start to make the necessary adjustments because you do have time. So it might be hard at first because you got to find that time and then spend that time that you do have that has been wasted on other things and start building something so you can work at a job that doesn't cause you to feel like that at the end of the day. We're almost done here. So this is what I do. This is how my mind works, and this is what I encourage everyone to do, but everyone has their own thing. There is something that really comes in handy with this. So I just bashed it for 30 minutes, and now I'm going to say the calendar app on here is my best friend. And I use this, and I schedule out hour by hour from the time I wake up. So if I get up at 5:30 a.m., from 5:30 to 6, that's get as much coffee in this body as I possibly can. Then at 6, it's workout. First amen from Russell all day. That's good. Workout. 7 to 8, it's get the kids ready and take them to school. And every hour, and if it's not on this calendar, it's not going to get done. And if it's not on this, or if I don't finish it within the time allotted, it goes on tomorrow's schedule. And I just encourage y'all to do that. Block schedule your time and start now that you know where you're spending your time, say, okay, now I'm going to start being intentional with this. I'm going to start stewarding this gift in a new way. When you identify where you're spending your time, when you're intentional with it, when you're disciplined with it. When I first got a hold of the grace message, the grace gospel, and you started talking about discipline, I'm like, that's works. That's legalism. Get your purse. We're leaving this legalistic religious church. I've matured since then. Actually, the word discipline and the word disciple come from the same root word. It's stewardship. It's discipline. It's not being swayed by the outside world, but it's allowing what's in you to be released, working out your salvation with fear and trembling. So discipline, being disciplined, when you steward it, you'll realize that you have more time than you thought you did, to chase your God-given dreams, to not live life as usual. And some of you, phones and TV, that's not an issue, but you get the point, right? Just learn, if all you have is 2 hours, steward that 2 hours and let that grow into 4 and multiply that. But if you're filling 168 hours, I'm sure there's some unnecessary things in it. And this is not this message where you got to go out and crush it and take everything by control and all that. It's not that kind of message. It's supposed to produce rest in your life so you can easily step into the life you were created for. I hope that was communicated in this message. It's a little silly with all this, but I hope the point was made. Let's steward our time. That's the first thing. That's the first thing I want to really, because as we talk about other areas of stewardship in our life, if you feel like you don't have any time, you're not going to do any of it. So spend this week. How are you spending your time? If you feel overwhelmed, what can you start to do? What can you cut? Budget your time just like you would your bank account. We got to stop making excuses. You're made on purpose for a person, called to greatness. Busyness doesn't equal productivity. That is good. I probably read that somewhere, but it just popped up. I made it up. We'll say I made it up. But we think that busyness is a good thing. Busyness is a bad thing. It doesn't equal productivity. You can do more in a lot less time. That's what we're created for. Come to me, Jesus says. Come to me and I will give you rest. That's what we're created for. Amen?